pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And I want to welcome all the attendees to our meeting, and a reminder that there will be public comment toward the end of this meeting. And I'm going to put up here the email. If you have a public comment, you can put it. Let's see. Here we go.
That's good.
George.org,
Yeah.
and the subject is public comment, and that way you can put any comments or questions that you might have, and we'll be able to read those off during public comment time, and I will display that again when the time comes. So this is our second ever virtual board meeting, and we're going to kick it off with Lynn King with some board recognition.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. As you probably know, our district is a member of the New York State School Board Association. And among the many services that they provide for districts, because they are a school board organization, they provide leadership and development opportunities for boards. And it helps board members increase their knowledge and skills and work on becoming better members of boards for great and better board governance. And it's an interesting program. There are 4 levels. The first level is board achievement. The second level is board excellence. The third level is board mastery. And the fourth level is lifetime achievement. And we have 4 recipients tonight. And all of these levels have, you're awarded different points. And from 1 through 4, it's 75 points, 150, 250, and then 500 for the big lifetime achievement award, which I will humbly say that I received a while ago, but we don't need to go there. So starting with Mr. Collins, who has achieved board mastery level, I congratulate you on your diligence and prominence, being a positive board member and learning as much as you can. And you are the proud recipient of 250 points. Congratulations, Mr. Collins.
Thank you.
Congrats.
It's been an honor working with NYSSBA. They've been a great organization.
Thank you for saying that. They'll appreciate it. And they do keep really in good touch with board members and individual board members and boards and superintendents. They provide many services. So our next recipient is Katie Bruning, and Katie is receiving 2 awards. First for board achievement, which is 75 points, and second for board excellence, which is 150 points. Katie, only your second year on the board, and you're already halfway through the expected training. So congratulations.
Thank you. And I so appreciate that the district supports these trainings and board development, because there's a learning curve with anything new that you do. So I appreciate what's happened, and I look forward to more trainings in the future. They're very valuable. So thank you.
All right. And thank you for being a trusted and well-informed board member. It makes all the difference. Our next recipient is our Madam President, Tricia Biles, and she is also receiving 2 awards. The first one for board achievement and the second one for board excellence, 75 and 150 points respectively. Tricia, thank you for all of your guidance and good work on behalf of our board. And congratulations for achieving these levels.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you for those recognitions, and I'm so proud to be part of a team that is committed to lifelong learning and improvement. I think that, you know, from the top, if we can set that example, that's what we're all about, and continuous learning. So thank you for that. I appreciate that very much.
Congratulations and thank you. And our last recipient tonight, not that last is least, but she was the last one I received in the mail. So this is for Melissa Seal, who, as a first-year board member, it is impressive. She has achieved board achievement level and has received 75 points. So Madam Seal, thank you so much for your diligence. Congratulations.
Thank you, guys. I've enjoyed my first year on the board, especially with this board. You guys have been wonderful. And thank you, everyone, for your support.
Right. Thank you all. And I will now turn it back to Madam President.
Very good. Thanks, Lynn. And we are next up with Michael Varney with the budget presentation.
Can I just say one thing before we move forward? I know, Mary Ann, you're going to get one of those too, but your work around the policy committee has been outstanding. So I would like to give you your own award.
Oh,
Work
good idea.
down there, so-
Yes, I concur.
Last 5 minutes of that project, but thank you.
Ditto.
Everybody see that?
Not yet.
Nothing?
Nothing yet.
All right, let me try again.
Oh, there you go. Now you're getting there. All right. Success.
You see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So first of all, a special shout out to the seniors. Congratulations. I'm sure this isn't the kind of senior year that they had anticipated. I'm sure it's one that they'll never forget. But we certainly wish them well, and as they move into the last few weeks of their Lake George career. I'd also like to thank all of the buildings and grounds and food service workers. You know, they've been coming in, keeping us clean, feeding our children since this started. And I'd also like to thank all the teachers that have been doing the great work in the cloud out there. I obviously couldn't get a slide with pictures of all of them, but you will see examples of the great work that they're doing as I move throughout the presentation. So we're proposing two propositions. The first is our annual budget, which is at $23,909,749. It is a very lean budget. It's a 0.4% budget to budget increase. We've worked hard to maintain the wonderful programs and services that we pride ourselves on here at Lake George. And we also worked hard to respect taxpayers during these very uncertain times. And the second proposition is for the purchase of 2 school buses. We are on a 10-year replacement cycle to make sure that we have well-functioning buses. So 2 buses are due to be replaced, but I would note that we are reducing the size of the bus fleet by 1 bus. We're actually getting rid of selling 3 buses, and we're reducing our fleet of vans from 8 to 6. From the original 3 budget presentations, there are changes that were made in each area, and I'll talk about that middle column. Basically, we have 5 retirements. There is an instrumental music teacher in the high school that's retiring. That position covers grades 4 through 6 in band programs. Cutting that position would mean removing the program. So to maintain that program, we've budgeted for the replacement of that position at all of these positions that we're recommending replacement are being budgeted at lower levels of experience to save on the budget. We're also replacing a teacher's assistant in the elementary school. TAs fill many responsibilities, including essential safety duties such as crosswalks in the AM, lobby duty, transporting students to vans and buses. And they also fulfill one-on-one support with our IEP students. And to make sure that we are continuing to meet the needs of our elementary students and special education students, we are budgeting to replace that position. We have a special education teacher that's retiring. We are repurposing that position, so to speak. It's going to be realigned to meet the social and emotional needs of students in the junior and senior high school per the IEP, the increased IEP needs in that area. We are not replacing an elementary school, a regular elementary school teacher. You know, to cut almost $300,000, there's just no way to do that without looking at staffing, considering it's 78% of the budget. And when you look at enrollment projections, it looks like we should be able to absorb that regular education position in the elementary school. We have a retirement in the high school in the ELA department. In the recent last few years, I might not have these numbers exactly right, but I think we had 3 retirements in the last 2 years. One of those teachers, actually 2 of those teachers were not replaced. Or we eliminated 1 position. I'm sorry, Fran, if I got that wrong, correct me. But that department is down to 5 teachers, which is what we really need across all departments in the high school to meet the needs of our students. You know, Fran and I have talked at length about, you know, what's coming up in the next few years, and certainly there will be continued opportunities in the high school to take advantage of attrition to bring the budget down a little bit. And we're also budgeting to add a full-time cleaner if we need it. You know, we're not really sure what the situation is going to bring as far as what school will look like in the fall, but certainly with the new cleaning and disinfecting protocols, new equipment that we've purchased to address those needs, we think we're going to have a need for some more power, some more people power, so to speak, to help address that. So when the newsletter comes out, that will be presented in a 3-section presentation: administrative, program, and capital, which is what I've stuck to here. The administrative section of the budget is changing, $88,910. That's primarily any contractual increases that were in there are offset by the removal of the salary for the director of curriculum. There will also be discussion to move 2 current staff members to administrative positions. These are 2 people that currently work here. This would reallocate money from the program to the administrative section in the event that that happens. So right now we're looking at a 3.6% decrease. For the program budget, the change is $103,361, a 0.6% change from last year to this year. Contractual increases in that area have been offset by attrition and replacement savings, and also there are significant savings from the teachers switching from the PPO to the alt PPO for insurance. And in the capital budget, the change is $79,830. That's a 2.9% change. Part of that is contractual. Part of that is adding the full-time position. So if you look at it all in comparison from year to year, we're looking at a 0.4% increase of $94,281. On the revenue side, I have no certainty whatsoever, unfortunately, as far as what state aid is going to be. What I have calculated into this chart here is a 15% decrease to foundation aid. Certainly that could change. It could be 20% of foundation aid. It could be 15% of total aid. I just have no way of knowing. But we're proposing a tax levy of 1.5%. And again, coming down to the total 0.4%. We are In terms of fund balance, the $1,292,000, that is roughly $350,000 of reserves we're appropriating to use next year, and $942,000 of additional fund balance. So basically looking to take any savings from this year and rolling it forward to help balance next year's budget. And that's it. Any questions?
Mike, I don't have questions, but I sit on the Audit and Finance Committee, as you know, and get to see and hear a lot of conversations. And I just want to thank you and the other district employees for their countless hours of collaborative work on evaluating where we could make cuts and trim the budget and where we may have needed more resources so that we could ultimately deliver excellent programming and have safe, well-functioning facilities and transportation and still remain fiscally prudent. So thank you to you and for all the folks for the hard work of making this sound budget.
Yeah, sure.
And Mike,
Yes.
thank you very much. I don't think for some reason I can't get on the camera, but I think you can hear me.
Yes.
You had said that 2 staff members were going to be moved to administrative roles. Is that what I heard?
No, I said there's going to be discussion of potentially moving 2 current staff members to administrative positions. These are 2
Give me
people.
an example of that. Pardon my ignorance.
For what's that?
Can you give me an example of that? Pardon my ignorance.
I'm one of them. I just got my school district business leader certificate to be an administrator.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
okay.
they're not new people. They're a movement of people within.
Okay. Okay. And then, so in summary, with the 5 retirements, we're replacing 4 people then.
Correct.
And then you had indicated we're not replacing the regular education teacher.
Correct.
Once again, pardon my ignorance, but when you say regular education teacher?
Well, because there's 2 retirements in the elementary school. One is a special education teacher. One is a regular education.
Regular. Okay. In reference to that. Okay. All right. No, I mean, and you referred to the reductions in the budget. That was from your original proposed budget, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Mike, and folks on audit and finance, I know you really were looking at and crunching numbers. We've had commentary from public saying, hey, why do we even need to increase taxes this year with the pandemic going on and all of the uncertainty? Can you speak to that a little bit about some of the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, with the tax cap in roughly 85% of Lake George's revenue is from the tax levy. I feel like I guess it's kind of slow and steady wins the race in this game. To go too low is setting us up for a future spike down the road really high. Because what happens is, let's say we went out at 0%. Then we would have to start next year. The calculation of the tax cap would be based on no increase from the previous year, and it hampers our ability to go out and raise that 85% revenue source. That's where most of it comes from in Lake George. So to not spiral that problem, I'd like to keep it low but steady.
Very good. I appreciate that. Thanks. And I wanted to. I'm sorry. Did somebody else want to chime in?
Just really quick, Tricia, Mike, any idea of when we're going to get more information from the state as to what this is going to look like moving forward?
Really? No, there's been nothing. I know that the state is waiting to see what the federal government's going to do, and they're currently trying to pass legislation, which would provide aid to the states. So I'm guessing that that's what's holding it up.
Up in the air at this point. So.
Yeah.
I wanted to just point out too, I know our Audit and Finance Committee has been working very hard to look at these numbers and keep the budget lean and be very responsible. And I actually, as a shout out, I think it's very exciting to think about bringing new entry-level teachers to Lake George. I think that this is a great environment to learn and grow, and we have some influence there. So that's exciting to me. I also wanted to just mention at a past board meeting, we had a public comment asking about, well, if enrollment is going down, why are costs still increasing? And I don't know if you can see this, but this was a public that dealt with that. That was just exactly right after that that member of the public asked.
You're still sharing your screen, so in order to see Tricia, you might want to turn that off.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go. Thanks, Sarah. So can you see that? I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, it's from the On Board magazine, from our newspaper, from the New York State School Boards Association. And it is just another example of how the board is informed and some of the things that are guiding our board decision making and with the district. And one of the things it mentions in this article is the costs for special education. And I just want to say this sounds great if we have a special education retirement and repurposing that to manage the needs around IEPs. So thanks for that.
And I wanted to just make a comment also. Mike, I appreciate you taking the time to explain, like, sometimes I think it's easy to draw a direct correlation between when teachers retire and who gets replaced, but that needs to be examined individually in terms of, what does the district actually need to function well, and that the mix will look different in each year, and that that you and the leadership group are examining what's coming up ahead. Every year is going to look different, but it just sounds like you're taking a really like detailed current and future look at that situation, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you explaining it too, because I think it's a source of confusion sometimes. So thank you.
Sure.
I think also just regarding the budget going forward, I think that the district, needs to make sure that we're trying to be creative. We're trying to look at every avenue that we have available to us, the resources that we have to be able to meet the needs of our students and our programs. Making sure that we're thinking out of the box as best as possible. I think that, to Mike's point, in the tax cap era, it's a little difficult to really push the budget down, the tax levy down, and then in future years you get impacted significantly. But I think we need to be thinking about how can we use our existing resources as best as possible, creatively thinking outside of the box to meet all the needs and priorities that we have.
Thanks.
Any other questions as we move away from the budget presentation? Okay, next up we have Jim Conway with the elementary update.
Sure. So first, congratulations to the board members on your recognition tonight. It's great and well deserved. I also wanted to mention, I know that you're voting on the resignations of the retirements, I should say, retirements of 3 outstanding educators currently working at LGS. And I can't say enough about each of them. Sue Moosbrugger, Lisa Lindsay, Sue Mason, They've done outstanding child-centered work with our students for many years, and they are going to be greatly missed, for sure. I want to publicly thank our staff and families and our students for everything that they continue to do during this, call it the emergency remote learning plan or teaching plan that we've been in the middle of since March. And it's all been new to our students, our families, and our staff. And I'm thankful for the partnership, as I mentioned last month, that has existed. So back in April, I talked to you about the fact that we would narrow our curriculum and really identify those most essential content and standards, and we have done that. Our reports to families are going to look very similar to what they have in the past, but the content that's noted in those progress reports or report cards will be on a smaller scale. And I do want to let you know that certainly Ginny Monshine, Megan Coker, and our curriculum leaders that did a tremendous amount of work to get us to that point. So I thank all of them for that. LGS received some very positive news several weeks ago, and I posted that information on our webpage at the end of April. We earned the distinction of being a 2019-2020 New York State recognition school, and that distinction takes the place of the Reward School program that the junior senior high was recognized for a few years back. I believe it was in 2012. And so that you're aware of this, the interim commissioner shared the following: recognition schools across the state demonstrate the relentless commitment of teachers, administrators, staff, and parents, without whom this growth would not have been possible. So it's a recognition that only 13% of the schools in the state achieved this past year. So I'm really proud of that honor and the work that our students and staff and families certainly are doing as we try to meet the needs of all students. Just a couple more items. We had our kindergarten parent information night last night, and I want to thank Ms. Rutnick for joining us. I know that's nice that she has an opportunity to welcome those new families. Of course, the meeting was done in a virtual format. We're hoping to still do a roundup over the summer and to have Jumpstart and the kindergarten orientation, but obviously we're still waiting on news as far as what we can and cannot do. But it was a nice opportunity to kind of put our parents' minds at ease and opening up those lines of communication as we look to next steps. Finally, our cabinet has been very busy. Our educational cabinet has been busy discussing end of the year plans for our students. As you can imagine, many of those special end of the year events had to be canceled, but we still want to make the end of the year special for our kids. So we're meeting, talking about how to do that. Talking about our moving up ceremony, virtual field trips, those types of things. In addition, we're talking about reentry plans and what that looks like for our staff and students, and ensuring that anything we do is following safety guidelines. So lots of items that we're discussing, again, to make the end of the year special and to make sure that our reentry plans are in good shape for whenever that reentry may be. And that's all that I have.
Jim, can I ask you one quick question? In regard to the kindergarten, the virtual kindergarten night, information night, was the expectation of attendance what you were thinking it would be, or less?
Yes, it was very, very well attended, actually.
Good. Oh, good. That's good.
A good sign was that our parents were pretty savvy with the devices. Not a lot of background noise or anything like that. So that was a good sign to see.
Do you have a kind of preliminary number of incoming?
So it oftentimes changes this time of year during the roundup or whatnot, but we're on the bubble of as far as 2 or 3 sections. So we're we seem to have leveled off as far as our reduction in sections.
Right.
So around 40, give or take. I don't know what's going to happen. Lynn and I discussed that the other day. You never really know over the summer.
Yeah.
Usually it's a plus or minus 5 students.
Yeah. Okay.
But solid numbers, so it's a good thing.
Would you plan on 3 teachers then in the kindergarten?
We'll see. We'll see what we need to do.
Okay.
We're not filling the one position, but the one thing that we do have, Lynn, is the way we schedule. We make sure that we provide a high level of support, whether that's through our reading teachers and teaching assistants. So if the class sizes were slightly larger, we we still provide support scheduling. And if they were a little lower in one place, they'll be a little higher in another. So still to be determined, but
Yeah.
I think
Thank
we'll
you.
be in good
I
shape.
know we've always prided ourselves on small class size, so good to hear. Thank you.
Jim, I wonder, when you reference virtual field trips, was that in connection to the transition plan for sixth graders moving to the junior senior high?
So I'll defer to Fran on the transition question. A lot of that is run through the guidance department there. We did send out an informational video that the department put together, sharing that information for students and families. But the virtual field trips, we're having communications about classes. For example, if a class, one of their big events was maybe to go to Chinchacook, is there an opportunity to do something special along the same lines, maybe doing that virtually, or the Boston trip? Something, obviously we're not heading to Boston, but is there something that we can do along those lines, either connected to the field trip, and in addition looking at some ways to celebrate, because we certainly celebrate at the end of the school year, and we want to do the same thing for our students.
Excellent. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for our elementary update? All right, moving on to secondary update with Fran Kokoza.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to number 44 of digital learning for our students, parents, and staff. We're about to turn the page to day 45, which is tomorrow. And it's it should not be recognized, but the amazing things that our staff and students and parents have done over the past 44 days have been nothing short of incredible. I cannot believe when I say that number that it's been 4 digital learning days. Like, that just blows your mind when you hear what we've been doing digital learning for 44 days. And many more to come. So I want to thank our staff and students and parents for everything that they've been doing. With that, to echo Jim's sentiments about Sue and Lisa, just personally and professionally, they have impacted the Kokoza family and the Lake High School students in positive ways. We wish them well in their next chapter in life. Some very quick things. The 6th grade transition, to answer Trisha's question. So Jen Polio put together a video presentation for our 6th grade parents and students. I can tell you by the number of hits on the video, it was watched multiple times, which is a good thing. And our hope is that sometime this summer we can do some of those transitional activities that our 6th graders have been doing for quite a long time to transition into this building as 7th graders. You know, the virtual piece still can accomplish some things. However, that new 7th grader stepping foot in the building for the first time, the emotions surrounding that and all of the things that we used to be able to do physically by getting them in the building is still not lost on us. So I'm very confident in our 7th grade team and our guidance counselors and our staff to be able to figure out creative ways to transition our 7th graders into the building. In regard to end of the year planning, so let's just say there hasn't been a night where Lynn and or I haven't lost sleep about the end of the year and graduation and end of the year ceremonies and award ceremonies and scholarships. And just today we were again trying out some plan Bs and plan Cs and plan Ds options for end of the year stuff. And I'm pleased with the support that Lynn has afforded us to kind of hold off on any formal decisions until we get clear and direct guidance from the Board of Health and the county, along with perhaps the education department, in regards to how we can thoughtfully and appropriately close out the school year, most especially for our seniors. So I know folks are very anxious about hearing what's the plan, and we appreciate everyone's patience as we try to develop Plan A and Plan B, right, Lynn, and Plan C and Plan D. And depending on where we're at the end of June, what we're able to do or what we're not able to do. That includes athletics and award ceremonies and scholarship ceremonies and so forth. With that said, Mickey Luce, with a heavy heart, announced after 42 consecutive summers, he's unable to do youth theater this summer. Typically, youth theater occurred during the month of July, and he weighed all of the considerations and with a heavy heart canceled youth theater this summer. However, he's quote unquote looking forward to year number 43. He's going to count it as 43 in dancing in the hallways, the cafeterias, and singing in the auditorium. So he's very confident that they'll be back next summer with one of the hallmarks of one of the outside programs that we have hosted here for 42 summers. Also, the Jumpstart programming that we utilize in both buildings to support our students to get them that leg up for September, the fall. At this point, our current thinking in both buildings is to delay our Jumpstart programming until the end of the summer. So the 3 weeks, the last 3 weeks of August is our current thinking. And we're hopeful that we'd be able to do that supportive programming to help our students who need it the most to transition back into school in September. Obviously, we would have to figure out things and be flexible with that programming and that planning as August gets closer based on the current guidance that we're given. Lynn and I had a very positive meeting with the senior class. We were pleased with the number of senior class members that showed up to our digital meeting, and we heard their questions and tried to answer the ones that we could and alleviate their concerns for the ones that we couldn't. Right, Lynn? And finally, similarly, with the elementary school cabinet, the high school forum, our shared decision-making body, reviewed a fairly comprehensive document on re-entering and reopening the school for the fall. So our current planning with our shared decision-making body is to review that guidance document in small committees over the next couple of weeks, perhaps take a step away from it for a little bit of time, and then re-engage with it so that we are all set from all constituents for the opening of school in September. One of the overarching themes that this document that we were given from our BOCES is about the educational piece of training and educating not only our staff, but also our students and our families as to what our best practices are going to be around hygiene and sanitary cleaning and keeping things sanitized on a daily basis, and that the most positive things that we can do is informing the public and getting people educated as to just some really good common practices so that we all are operating from the same understanding. So it's our hope as we get through that document, and it's a fairly comprehensive document, that we'll be able to apply specifically what's needed in Lake George High School and Lake George Elementary School and apply it to our own school communities. So I could go on forever, but I know it's a long meeting. I just can't say enough how much thanks and gratitude I have to our staff and parents and students for what they've been accomplishing the past 44 days.
Thank you, Fran. Are there any questions for Fran?
I just want to say,
All right.
you guys have been doing a wonderful, just a statement, you guys have been doing a wonderful job. Lynn, Fran, Jim, and thank you for your leadership during this time. Everything has been working out really well. Thank you, guys.
A lot of changes to adjust to on a daily basis, and you just keep doing it. So thanks for the creative thinking. All right, next up we have Lynn Rutnick with the superintendent report.
I will start just with my own gratitude bucket to fill up. I want to thank the board for their support during this very unique time, and definitely Jim and Fran for steering the ship, and the leadership team who are about to embark on the reopening plan. You know, that's a very heavy lift, and I think it's going to take time, and we're going to be communicating with the greater community that we're starting this planning so that people know it's going to be very thoughtful and intentional. I also want to just make sure that I thank also the students and the faculty and staff who have really risen up during this time to remain positive and to reach out to us when they do need us. The food service staff continue to just be amazing. And our custodians, there hasn't been a complaint out of them. And, you know, they have just really shown up for the job that needs to be done. As well as the town and Mayor Blaze. They've invited me on the COVID task force. So it's really good to see the bigger picture about what's going on. They're learning from what we're learning in the school, and I'm learning about things around businesses and opening and questions that we have. So it's really, you know, that whole idea, I've said it before, but it takes a village. And it seems like we're all in the boat rowing in the same direction with a lot of empathy and compassion. And it's really been wonderful. So thank you to everybody. I also just want to remind folks of the timeline. If you didn't get the postcard, we got one, and that really outlines the upcoming budget vote and board elections. So thank you to Tara and everyone at BOCES to got these in the mail if you didn't get them. So as you know, May 11th has come and gone. We've gotten the petitions from the candidates. May 19th, we are hopefully approving the budget tonight with the Board of Education. And on May 12th, the first public notice was published. On the 20th and through the 22nd, we're going to really hard try to get our absentee ballots mailed. That's going to be a huge lift. And a big shout out to Sarah and the team of folks who are going to do that. Stuffing 5,000 envelopes and getting them has not been an easy task, but we will make it happen. The 26th is the public hearing. The 20th again through the 22nd, the property tax report card will be filed. The 26th, copies of the budget available to anyone who are requesting them. We will get those out to folks. And then on the 9th, we're going to have our annual meeting and our election and budget vote. So this postcard again it gives a lot of that detail that when you have to have your ballots to us so they can start the counting. So it's been it's not going to be perfect, so it's going to be the best that we can do, and I'm proud of the efforts, and I really appreciate the collaboration and the support from everyone, including Capital Region BOCES and Wish We BOCES, because they have really been working together to find the best way to get this done. And our newsletter is out. It's gone to print, so we're hoping that with the staffing that they have, that they'll be able to turn this around and get it out in the next day or two. So everyone, you know, say a little prayer that goes out. As you know, we sent out some thought exchange, just asking about how it was going. Yeah, you have a question?
I do. I just wanted to go back to that timeline. I'm sorry. And clarify here at the meeting. It's my understanding that we don't have specific guidance about the budget vote in past times. If the budget vote had failed first go round, there would be a second go round, and it looks unlikely. Is that true this year, that there would be a second go round, that there's a possibility that if the budget does not get approved by vote, that it could just automatically go to contingency?
That is my understanding, but Mike, will you confirm?
I have not heard that, but I'll check into it.
Okay.
That's Yeah, because of the uniqueness and the lateness of the budget. Yes.
Right.
That's what I've been hearing.
Okay.
You're welcome. The community engagement survey, just we sent out another thought exchange, a high degree of participation, a lot of people ranking thoughts, and again, overwhelmingly positive. As we've gone deeper into the virtual learning world, there are things that have come up, and I appreciate both Jim and Fran addressing those immediately when they came up. It is an anonymous survey, so we just encourage people to continue to use our communication protocol and go directly to the teacher, and then go to Fran and Jim if they have questions. And as I keep saying, we're not perfect, but boy, are we putting our best foot forward and doing the best we can. And Megan as well, she's really been offering some wonderful support to the teachers, to the families and the students, as well as Dane and Matt. So, that's just been a nice tool to be able to check in. And a lot of people are like, we're doing okay. We hope you're doing okay. We're done with this. So this thought exchange had a little bit of a different tone to it, but again, all good. I'm very proud of the comments. The non-resident student tuition policy we've been talking about, as you know, for a couple years, and we've made a lot of progress in that area. This is year 3 that we've been talking about it, and so I appreciate Mary Ann bringing it back up to talk about it again. We did look at, and Mike had brought again the work from Kate Dubois, all the other districts and the tuition for non-resident students, and we really looked at, should we at this time be moving forward with, last year, if you remember, we did a soft start with opening up the tuition for non-resident for our faculty and staff, and it's gone, I believe, overwhelmingly good. Fran and Jim, I think, could speak to that, but so far it's just been wonderful. And at this time, I think I'd probably be in a very different place with making a recommendation, but knowing all the uncertainties, or not knowing the uncertainty of the situation when we come back in September, I am not in favor of moving forth with a recommendation at this time to adjust that tuition rate. However, I'm not saying that I wouldn't continue to look at it as times kind of settle down. But I think our staff, our administrators, and everyone is going to be under a lot of strain. And I think that there's a lot of uncertainties that, after our discussion at our recent Audit and Finance Committee, that came forward. And I just don't think, with all the changing times right now, that is in the best interest of the school district, the students, the faculty, or staff. And so at this point, I am not moving forward with a recommendation to lower the tuition cost for Lake George or non-resident students. Does anyone have any questions about that? There's been a lot of work and a lot of discussion, and it's not, that door is not closed. It's just, for right now, I don't think that's the right thing to do for next year.
So that all makes sense. So I think once everything stabilizes again, hopefully in the fall, that's when we get revisited then.
I don't know if we're going to be stable in the fall.
I'm an optimistic person.
Yes, no, yes. Yeah, Tom, yes. I'm a big proponent of and supporter of doing it. I just think that the timing is off right now.
Understood.
But, also we recognize, and in our discussions, how, 1 or 2 students can really help sustain our programs as well, our athletic programs, our rosters that we're talking about. So they're, for every positive or every negative, they balance each other out. But I think right now our efforts really need to be focused intentionally on how we're going to get going and have, really not have a lot of quote unquote distractions moving forward.
I'd just like to reinforce what you were saying, Lynn, and thank you, to Mike, to the policy committee, to the audit and finance committee. There were lots of discussions and thought around this, and thank you for putting the attention to it.
Yes, and the item is not, that door is not closed forever. That we can bring it back up when things settle down. Reentry, just as Fran had mentioned, again, I want to thank the building principals for taking the torch with their shared decision-making bodies to start looking at all the documents provided from our local BOCES and the Department of Health. We've got some work to do. I appreciate right now that our BOCES is regionally planning with us and helping us with this. And so in every committee, subcommittee, like I believe I updated you on, last time or in my Friday notes, we have a district level committee, junior, senior high school committee, an elementary committee, a building and grounds committee, safety committee. And so we have representation from Lake George on those committees, but BOCES is facilitating and leading the committee. So when we walk away, they give us the notes, they fill the files up, and really we will, Fran and Jim will be using all of that, as well as Mike, to help lead the charge moving forward to see how this is going to work in our school district. And it's not going to be a one size fits all. So you may hear, well, Queensbury is doing this, or Warrensburg is doing that. I mean, we're going to be looking at our folks who are going to be having to implement this to help us with the plan. So as soon as we get the plans, we'll start sharing them out for feedback, and before we make it back here in September. Anyone have any questions on reentry? Okay. Spark, Megan, and we have been kind of talking about this, but then we've been really busy, so it has been parking lotted. But I wanted to ask Megan, she gave a really great update to the principals, and I asked for our feedback about where to go next in our virtual Spark meeting with this initiative. So Megan, would you like to just provide a brief update on what you're thinking?
Yeah, so after that meeting, I think we feel comfortable moving forward with continuing the work of reviewing, reflecting, and revising those district goals and targets. And we'll be communicating out to the stakeholders with those next pieces, which will probably be a combination of some asynchronous work where people will be working digitally on their own time, their own pace, and some synchronous work together. So we can use our time efficiently in managing that collaborative effort with a big group. And we're going to continue to build on the feedback that's come in already in regards to sort of consolidating some items, you know, and really streamlining those goals and targets, along with pulling a social emotional learning component into it.
So you should expect to get, Megan and I will be working on the message that will come out from my office, just to get the attention of folks to say where we're going next with it. And I, again, want to thank Megan for helping organize and facilitate and lead this, because it's been really helpful. And then next, I would like to talk about 2 items around personnel. One of them is the Director of Innovation and Technology, and the other is the School Business and Finance Manager. And as you know, I have talked a little bit in past board meetings about the evolution of the Director of Innovation and Instructional Technology, and how when this role, and I did not hire for this position or create this position, but it has really evolved, and it's been really enlightening just to work with the individual in that position to see where we've been, and really where the shifts have taken place and where we'd like to go in the future. And you know, I had mentioned again in a couple board meetings that I would like to consider this position and talk about the impact it's having on the district. And really this time has highlighted, you know, with COVID-19, to me, especially as the lead learner of the district, that looking at the heavy lifting that's been going on with the Director of Innovation and Instructional Technology, not only with our strategic plan, but right now looking at the intense amount of support and expertise, and you know, kind of lifting us up during virtual learning, and it has been pretty awesome. And I wanted to bring that up for discussion. Right now, that position has been in a civil service role, and this person has been at our district for, I believe, around 10 years and has done a wonderful job. But the position, I look at it really, is it good for the district to be looking at expanding this role? And you know, for lack of better terms, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And I believe, looking at, in all my experience of, you know, 20 years of education, this is this position is very administrative. It really looks K-12 system-wide. There are personnel oversight and responsibility. We have the Smart Bond money in there. We have now the addition and the huge focus on data privacy in our district. This position oversees our information data specialist, as well as the techs, very closely aligned with the library media specialists, who are some of the best in the area. And I don't believe we would be where we are today in hearing the positivity and the feedback without this role. So I would like to, in keeping with our values and our needs in the district, show the world that this position is valued and it's needed, and that it really is a district level need right now to be looking at where we're going to go. And I think that the world of education right now and is going to look very different. I think our classrooms are going to look different. I think this position is instrumental in helping our students, our faculty, and our families keep abreast of where we need to go. And so I did have that discussion with the principals. They gave me their feedback. They had the discussion with their shared decision-making bodies. They gave me their feedback. And I have, shared that feedback with the Board of Education around, like, let's talk about it. I know that this is not the ideal time. I know that people have a lot of questions, but I want to really also state that this is not creating a new position as much as it is looking at a position, an existing position that has truly evolved, and in the current situation in the world and education, both local and nationally, I see this position as really out in the forefront of leadership and innovation and opportunities. So that is the first position. And the second position is the school business manager position. The folks who were involved in that, the last hiring stage of that, were Tim and Lynn. And there was a gentleman's agreement that, and a very transparent discussion, that the person who was going to be hired for that position was going through their school business district leadership certificate, and that the expectation would be that that role would be, once that criterion certificate program was finished successfully, that would move into a district level leadership position. Again, not a new position, not newly budgeted, not having impacts on our current budget. So I wanted to put that out there, and it's okay if we respectfully agree or disagree, but I think the open, transparent discussion is definitely needed. And some of the themes that I shared with you, I'm happy to again address around, especially at the elementary school. Like, if you're an elementary school person, you're thinking, we've been not replacing teachers, and that, that can feel kind of yucky to the folks, who are doing this work. Also, is this the right time? Also, what's going to change when that person, or if that person were to move into an administrative role? So let's talk.
Lynn, thank you for sharing the information to the board from the LGEA and the leadership in the district. That is very much appreciated. One of the questions was why the need for administrative position versus teacher leader? So can you help us understand that?
Yes, I will say historically, working in both systems with teacher leaders who I value and appreciate, that's a great way to get some work done, and also support people who are at a beginning level, who are looking into leadership opportunities. I mean, as the lead learner of the district, it's also incumbent upon me and the board and the principals to make sure that we support folks who want to be leaders. But this position is really not an entry-level leadership position. Like I said, I believe the responsibilities that with the data privacy and the strategic plan around innovation and engaging learning environments, that's a really hard item to be doing and making movement on when you're in the same unit with other folks. And it sometimes it can work, but I think with the heavy lift that's going to be in front of us, having the certificate, having the knowledge, having all the skills and experience that we have, our district has literally put into this position. I think that it has evolved into an administrative role. We have moved that person into APPR roles, which has been nice, which that person would be in classrooms giving feedback to folks and sharing that load with the other two building administrators. But really looking district wide, I can tell you right now what I have seen, the lens that I have seen is really that person in that position helping, like Jeff Ziegler had done, really bring the two buildings together and oversee also some of the instructional technology pieces that are just going to be inherent in what we do next as an organization. So that's not really something that I would expect my teacher leader to be doing. The responsibility is greater. The stakes are higher. The data privacy officer, especially that piece, Megan sorry, I don't want to use names. I apologize. The director of innovation and instructional technology has already, because of the knowledge base that person has been way in front of that effort, really like out in front of it, doing all the work that needed to get done internally, guiding it, organizing it, and supporting the professional development. And if we misstep in that area, that impacts our budget, our paychecks, it's huge. And I know that as a board, you guys learned about that at the NYSBA conference as well. Like it can't be underscored enough, that data privacy piece. And it is changing the way we do business in our classrooms. It could be, it could take that person way off track from that innovation goal number 3 as well.
Lynn, I'm glad you brought up the NYSBA conference, the law conference at the NYSBA retreat. That was the biggest takeaway that I had from that day-long training, was the focus on the data privacy, the Ed Law 2D, and the emphasis of the person in that role being an administrator. Looking at the original job description that says the civil service works with administration, and then this position becoming an administrative position. I guess my question is a little bit about we would be just kind of shifting a title, shifting funds from from what I understand, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I heard you say that the funds would be shifted from program to admin if this gets approved. Will services be impacted? Will direct student services be impacted at all? Are we taking a person who works directly with students at all and putting them more behind a desk?
That would not be my goal. My goal would be that this person would continue to be out and about supporting teachers and really supporting the building leaders and the two curriculum folks in getting the work done and kind of tying that together and stepping away and, from the building perspective and saying, how can we get this done so we have some type of continuity in with the data privacy officer role, the tools we're going to be using, but also the structures we're going to be using. And then when you look at innovative and engaging learning, what does that look like at the elementary level, but also building upon where we want them to go to be empowered learners at the junior, senior high school. And that vantage point is, it's important to have a district level vantage point from that. There was something else you said that I just thought of. Go ahead, it'll come to me.
That I said program, about program, and then moving from the job description saying that they are working with administration to actually being administrative, which I look at that and I see supervising staff, and as you were saying, that this role has evolved to help with accountability and evaluation and development.
One thing you mentioned, Trish, was the shifting of funds from one place to another. And Len, I think you had said that there wouldn't be a financial impact to the district by making the shift in either one of these positions. Did I hear that correctly? And I guess I'm thinking not only this year, short term, but long term.
For specifically the director of instructional technology, that position has been set up in that it used to be, well, it is currently a 10-month position with days in the summer, and then we have stipends on top of that. And this really simplifies and folds the stipend in to say this is part of what the expectation is, but also a 10-month employee now, knowing right now, if we have a 10-month employee with summer days, I mean, it would be moving to a 12-month. And that gives us a lot more flexibility to get done what we need to get done. If there's going to be family academies, if there's going to be teacher academies, that 12-month, and then vacations we would work out. But I don't necessarily want to talk too much about individual contracts, but there would be an impact with the school business administrator, and that was discussed at time of hire, but not with the director of innovation and instructional technology. No.
So in that position, you're saying things would just be shifted around and it wouldn't be a financial impact.
I also, when I talked to LGE, I really appreciated the discussion I had with them, which they didn't understand that these civil service contracts are renegotiated every year, and sometimes we'll do 2 years, but both of these contracts are up for negotiation right now. And I just think that's an important item that both Amy Baker's like, I didn't know that, and nor would you. That's something that we have to renegotiate. So right now is the time to renegotiate that. And it's funny because some of the questions that came up were, why would you think of doing this now? And to be honest, in my discussion that I had with both the president and the board and the vice president and the president, it's right now is highlighting both with the fiscal state of our state and the nuances and really the uncertainty, to have someone in that role that knows what's going on, that is, we can retain excellent folks to do that work. I think that's so important right now. And the COVID-19 to me has really, and the whole world has highlighted the inequities and the flaws in some of our systems that we have. And I think that, and I'm not at all threatening the board, I'm not at all, but I'm saying if we were to not have these positions and have these folks who have given so much to us, valued back, I just don't know what that would look like in the future. And it's part of my job and my responsibility to ask myself, is this good for the district? And I believe this is good for the district as a whole. And one of the other questions is, well, how would this really impact children? And if these two systems are not working effectively, that impacts our staff, and that completely impacts our children. And right now, I believe that both of these positions, are really impacting positively, making an impact on our system, our staff, our leadership team. And I think it is the right thing to do, especially at a time of such uncertainty. And I know that the timing is not good.
Len, I have a couple questions, and I appreciate your responses. Thank you. One question that I had is, would shifts toward to administrative roles, would that change the organizational chart in any way? And the chain of command, how would that be impacted, if at all? And then my other question is, you said that these are not creating new positions, but are they technically new positions? Yeah. And if so, does that obligate us to what are we obligated to if that's the case?
Yes, and that's a good question that I did share, that, some folks, it got brought to me by the Lake George Education Association. Well, it does seem a little unfair if these new positions are created, out of civil service into a TRS tenured position. Would we not hire for them? Would we not go out and post and hire for them? The Board of Education, superintendent has the authority to bring forth a recommendation. The board has the authority to appoint folks. That being said, I did point out a couple instances recently with, TOSAs that they come at the recommendation of the principal. And, that's not always the case that we go out and post everything. But I'm open to that. That's to me, it does get into, our values. What do we value? I mean, what are we trying to serve? If we have folks that are currently in a role and doing an outstanding job, is I don't know, is the juice worth the squeeze on that one? But I'm happy to do it, and I'm sure that those two individuals. Actually, I don't want to speak for them. They might think that would be an insult. They might say, "Sure, I'm happy to re-interview." But the interview process is pretty heavy, and right now we also have a lot going on. So if the board would like to me to post them and interview for them, I serve at the will of the board. I would do that.
And I just wanted to know what our obligation, if there was an obligation attached to that. And then the other,
I can tell you, I would, if I move an official recommendation forward, I would recommend that we do not do that. I part of the reason I'm doing this is because it's good for the organization, but I also, it's my job to make sure that I'm identifying the strengths and the weaknesses in the organization. And I think we have two huge strengths in the positions currently. So that would probably not be my recommendation, but that's okay if we disagree on that.
I think it's always a bonus when you can move forward internally and have some familiarity or a lot of familiarity with our students and how we work, our goals and values. I think that's a real plus to be able to move someone forward or develop a position that's already there into something that's going to be more advantageous for the students moving forward in a very different kind of world that we're going to be looking at.
Agreed. The other part of my question was about the organizational chain of, would that shift affect that chart?
Both of the positions would be district level, but again, the principals would still, their direct line of supervision, how I'm seeing it, would still be me. But we would have to really, I kind of like, I'll talk about the student support piece, as we lived through it this year, we can come back and talk about that. But right now, Megan, all the Megan, Mike, Fran, and Jim, those positions would not change as far as who they're answering to or who supervises them.
If I may, Lynn, so
Yes.
with regards to the existing position of Director of Educational Technology Services, what would happen with that position? It would be eliminated then?
The civil service position would be eliminated.
So that's eliminated, and we would create a new position, administrative position. Okay.
Right. And that came up as well. LGEA asked me because one of the members' spouses was a civil service individual, and it was a good question. So I checked into that with Gervin and said, is there anything I'm missing? And they said, no, you can eliminate the civil service position and move it to, any unit. That's not an issue, according to Gervin.
Okay.
Gervin being our attorneys that work with you consistently. In case people in the audience don't know who Gervin is, those are our attorneys.
And Lynn, if you could, why would a civil service position be created in the first place versus a district position? What would be the criteria for classifying something civil service and posting it that way?
Tricia, I can say I didn't kind of inherited this structure. And so I can just speak from experience about civil service that sometimes you find a need, and I can't speak for Mr. D, but you don't really know where, back years and years ago, where the instructional technology piece was going. All we knew as a district, I imagine, is we needed help with the one-to-one initiative, the rollout, the training. And so many times in districts that I've worked in, civil service positions are created because you know, they are not tenure track. They do not have as much sustainability, so to speak. And so they can kind of come and go, civil service positions, but not as much, obviously, when you're in teacher's retirement. And it's really more of a commitment for a district to say, I'm committing to this role and responsibility and this need. Whereas civil service, you know, I'm not mandated to do written evaluations. You know, we sit down and talk and the work speaks for itself, but it really is a commitment from the district when you move or decide that's what you'd like to do. That's been my experience.
And with a decade of this position to look at having increased stability, longevity, and accountability really is one of the reasons to put it on the table now.
Well, and I also appreciate, you know, that the board, some of the board members have been, you know, very complimentary about the director of innovation and instructional technology, and asked me, quite frankly, to where are we at with this, and you know, that I think that you in your time here, whether it's been a board member or a member of Spark, has really seen this role evolve. And so, you know, I also want to thank you for bringing this to kind of, not my attention. I know I've been thinking of it, but it's been nice to have the conversation with some of the board members as well.
Sure.
If
I could just point out or ask, we have had school business officials who were administrators in the past. How long ago was that?
I did ask that question of the business folks. I believe everyone but Kate was a business administrator. So I believe because Kate did not have her certification, when she was brought on, she was a school business official or manager.
Yeah, manager.
Yeah.
Very good.
So I know I've shared with you some of these themes. I just need to look at them one more second. Back. Yeah, you know, I will say this, something to consider is the optics. You know, that all groups really said the optics of having top heavy, you know, district level administration when we are definitely talking about a declining enrollment. You know, the other big elephant in the room is 3 years ago, we did eliminate a building level administrative position. And I just want to be crystal clear that, you know, in almost all my discussions, it was brought back to Lynn that you said that was all about enrollment. And while I did say that it was, you know, enrollment was a piece of it, that it was not the only piece in it. And I'm not going to kind of go back there, but if you look at my past presentations, you know, and again, times change. So I can't look back 3 years ago and predict that we'd be in the middle of a pandemic situation. But I can tell you, as I move down my bullet and talking points, I'm going to talk a little bit about that student support piece, which may help folks, you know, who brought that question to me, and I invite that conversation as well.
Thank you for your openness to talk about that and look at the big picture. I think that's very helpful as we're, you know, making decisions around this, Lynn.
Any other questions on this item? Again, I'm not recommending it right now. I'm having an open conversation around it, and that's what we're doing. Tim, do you have a question?
No. Okay. No, I think it's a good conversation, and I think it's a good conversation ahead. I think you covered, I think, very well between your presentation and responses to the questions, some of the concerns that I had. I mean, I certainly, support, maintaining continuity in those positions and, supporting the people that have done a good job within the district. I did have some reservations, some concerns about certain things, but you've addressed them. So thank you.
Okay, and I hope later on tonight, if we do choose to go into a proposed executive session, we can talk about the contract pieces that we can't talk about in public, in open session. Okay. So another item that I woke up this weekend thinking about is athletics. As you know, we value our coaches and our programs and our extracurricular opportunities. So this is even not as much with coaches, but it's kind of with all of our extracurriculars. Should we not continue to go for some reason back to school? But I did want to focus. I just want you to be thinking, and I'd love your feedback so that the principals and I and the athletic director can understand your thinking, or any questions you have that we can answer. This year we paid our coaches. They had their team, they were connecting with parents, they have done amazing things on Google Classroom, doing exercises, and I've seen so much of it, and it really has been such a value to our students to keep connected with their coaches. I mean, these folks are their heroes. They are their confidants. They are the people who sometimes kids come to school because of them. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that we don't know what Section 2 is going to do, but there is a possibility that they may not come back and say that we're going to have a fall season, or they may shorten it. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. We all really hope that we'll be back, but the reality is, I did reach out to Gervin and said, do you have any ideas? I reached out to the other local districts who are doing some prorating, but it is illegal to pay for services not rendered with taxpayer dollars. And I know that we moved forward, that just business is business. We move forward with updating our lists, and we've got folks that we've already updated our coaches list, and we did pull that to talk about it. But the reality is we probably need to have an open discussion about how to move forward. We can pull the whole list and and do a new resolution and talk to obviously our LGEA folks, and I want to hear from Fran and Kyle, but the reality is we might be up against another situation like this, and I wanted to hear your feedback.
Well, as you said, it really is very much up in the air as to where we're going with this. So we can talk about possibilities, but I think it's too early right now to even have a direction at this point. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
I agree with that. It's a bit premature, and we're not under a time crunch with this by any means. We can open the discussion and continue having the discussion with the parties that you aforementioned, and move it even to a June or even past that. I agree with Melissa that we have plenty of time to make sure. And as you pointed out very clearly, those are taxpayer dollars and not ours to really play with.
So what is I guess my concern would be, what would be the impact of, approving a coach's list and what would be the impact or the perception for the coach, from that action? So I guess I'd want to make that very clear from the board's perspective, what the implications of that action are.
So I can tell you that I asked those questions to Gervin, and basically they had said that what they have suggested is you go ahead and approve the coach, and you say, congratulations, you have been approved as the coach. However, the directive is really that your season does not start unless you hear from the superintendent that, who principal and the AD will tell me section has opened up for play, but I agree. We need to give these folks a commitment and a congratulations. They've gone through interviews, but that really what you don't want is, well, I've already reached out to parents and I'm already reaching out to students. You do that as the coach, but ultimately if the season doesn't get off the ground, it's just going to be a sticky wicket. So, and it is for every school district, and it's unfortunate, but you know, Fran is here. He can. I mean, it's kind of hard to say we're not in a rush. I mean, the football folks want to reach out to their families, so I think at minimum we'd get them on the list. We would approve it and let them at least contact their kids with some messages. But you know, practices and things are kind of on hold right now.
Lynn,
Good.
in April, we did already vote on the fall coaches list. So what is our obligation when you have contracts already been?
We don't. We can rescind it because the season hasn't started. That was a question that I asked. You know, because it's just our business. We do these things. We don't. It's almost rote as far as the coaches list, but we can rescind it because the season hasn't started, and there's been such clear, open, honest, transparent communication from the section that they don't know what they're going to do, and no decisions have been made.
When are the contracts normally signed with the fall coaches?
Sarah, do you know that?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
When are the contracts signed with the coaches?
So they are normally in the process between or right around June. It all depends on the budget. Budget has to pass first, and working with business office to get them printed and then signed and then sent out. So
they haven't been signed.
They haven't been printed. They haven't even been run yet.
And so I think that the what I'm hearing is the immediacy relates to what kind of preliminary work the coaches usually do prior to the season starting. And I would consider that work, that if, you know, if there's a commitment there, that there should be some compensation if there's an expectation of work. But there would also need to be clear guidance from us to say, no, don't work until a particular date. And that's when we would make the decision of whether that season was going to go forward or not. So I think we need to decide if, you know, there would be partial compensation for preliminary work, even if the season were to be canceled, or partially, you know, abbreviated. I guess my other question too is, what happens with that money? Does that get reinvested into athletics? Does that get, you know, put into cost savings for the year and put into the budget?
Would go back in the general fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add to the conversation about the contracts. I mean, at that time, it sounds like it's coming soon. I would just make sure that the desired language is in the contracts that covers whatever eventuality, you know, we're coming up with here. Whether it's a pro rata or whatever it is that language is incorporated into the contracts.
And I like what you said, Tricia, about, you know, and that's the work that Fran and Kyle and I can do with, maybe we come up with the hourly, I'm sure that's already established, but what is it going to take for each coach to at least get their rosters up, you know, talking to them, because that is work, you know, that they might not be out running around the track or, but Fran has a question or a comment.
So the preseason work has already begun for those fall seasons. The coaches are already filling their rosters. They're already thinking about the fall, and they do that in earnest really June, July, and the season does start August 17th. Historically, and Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the appointments are normally official at the July reorg meeting for the following year. So I, you know, one of the questions that I would have, and I'm not the legal expert to answer this, but if the coaches are functioning in a capacity already in a preseason mantra, if they're not board approved, then what liability does that, you know, perhaps put the district in? not to talk about the contractual obligations, that I think that's also a separate consideration. The cart and the horse, does the board appointment occur and then the contractual obligation starts when the contract is signed, or is it the other way around? I don't know the answer to that.
I would say it's like, I don't know what it says in the contract, but I would say that's what it should say in the contract.
Right.
My point.
Irvin was very clear that where you're going to run into problems is when people we need to be very clear to say, okay, you've been appointed, but you're not starting, or you've been appointed and we will give you 3 hours to connect with X, Y, and Z. But because that's what'll start happening. Like everyone, I'm doing this, and so there really needs to be a clear message that we can't. We could be under a lot of scrutiny if we're moving forward with paying coaches without a season. She was pretty clear in saying that to me.
Lynn, if I may ask, who makes the decision? Is it the state, Section 2, or the league?
Section, I believe, and then they tell us. I mean, everything I'm hearing from Kyle and Fran is that the section says they're doing this. The section says, but Fran, you can answer that. But it's usually the section.
So typically, the NYSSBA, the overarching organization that oversees each of the sections, gives out those recommendations for the state tournaments. And then locally, the sections, and when I say locally, Section 2 is huge. There's local decisions within that section. So if you kind of reverse back to when we were entering the closure, our coaches did start the season. And, initially NYSSBA was having recommendations about how to safely do that. And then one by one, the sections were closing, and then NYSSBA did pulled the tournaments and then the sectionals, and then the whole season was canned. So I don't know. It really depends on what New York State looks like on August 17th, whether we're going to have just sectional play or regional play or statewide play. And then that will determine what we're able to do here. And I know Jim Conway could add a little more to that as well. But I think that's somewhat the overarching general. Yeah. Okay.
So it sounds like August 17th is really the date.
Well, it's the official start, but there's a lot of pre-work that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think that it's good that we're having this conversation for transparency, so that people know this is an upcoming issue, and that we do our best to communicate via email or written correspondence with the coaches, so that they know that this is in flux and this is a potential moving forward, just to make sure that we're communicating well.
Yeah, and I will be working with Amy as well. I just gave her an FYI, that we were going to have the conversation, and that we've got to get some guidance on this. So
perhaps Mike can have a conversation with the auditors to gain some guidance on what we can and can't do when it comes to payment of coaches if the season doesn't move forward.
And I would broaden the discussion not just to athletics, but we're talking extracurriculars in nature, because the similar situation could exist for those afternoon, evening, weekend extracurricular situations, clubs, and so forth. Not to say that we wouldn't do those, but what they would look different if we're not able to do sports practices and athletic season. Then that makes our after-school period look much different as well.
Good point.
And I believe that they are normally all July 1 at the reorg meeting, that updated final list, Sarah.
It can be any time now. It wouldn't be unusual for next year's list to be approved at tonight's meeting, because people at this time are starting to give their resignations. The positions are posted. it's not unusual to get that list together and start working on it and have the board approval. So
Okay. Well, thank you for the discussion. If you have anything else to add, let us know. Student support service update. Fran and I have been talking about, as you know, I did my mid-year check-in with folks to what's going well, what's not, what things should we be considering. We were about to get together, and I tasked Fran to see if we could get together with the dean and the student support director and the CSE chair to check in and kind of say, hey, you've lived through this structure for the better part of a year. And a task Fran to go meet with them alone as a group and say what's working, what's could be improved upon. Are there any changes that you want to make? And unfortunately, we got a little sidetracked the last 2 months, but we were able to have that meeting maybe like a week ago or so. And then we had a follow-up meeting. So I appreciated Fran's clearing his schedule to have that conversation. And it was a really positive conversation. We have some new challenges coming our way in September around students and, what things are going to look like for our students when they walk through the door in September. And so Fran is working through some possible shifts and changes that might make more sense within that structure to support the junior senior high school. We still have some K-12 pieces such as homeless and DASA. We have the incredible lift of the Title I grant that the student support director does. And, everyone has just, again, done a great job. There are just things that probably might make sense if they're tweaked a little bit. And as you know, from Mike's update, we have a blip of kids that are coming through with some pretty heavy social emotional supports that have that are mandated IEP services. So I appreciate Fran working really hard with the director of special education and creating a new structure that will support those students and their IEP needs. And that will hopefully lift away, some of the heavy burden that the dean has done a great job supporting. But really, just to summarize, because we're not there with official recommendations, but it does look like with the special education needs and the needs from the building level that we will be increasing the dean position, and we will be making some tweaks in responsibilities. But those guys are still working with Fran, and it's so far the meeting that I had with them, it just seemed to be like those discussions were very valuable, and they're working through a lot. And especially with the new social emotional learning goal, I think that things will become clearer as we move to June. Did I miss anything, Fran?
No, I think you covered it all. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that? I'm hoping that we can, it's not really anything that the board has to approve, but we want to update you and inform you. So we will hope to come to you with, we'll give you some information before to review. And I'm sure Fran will bring that also to his shared decision-making folks, and we can have something to maybe co-present to you by the June meeting.
Excellent.
Capital project, I know mine is like the whole board meeting, but there's so many updates right now that we haven't gotten to. Mike, I'm going to throw the ball to you, and the capital project is just going along, and one of the silver linings of the pandemic is we're getting some things done ahead of time. So
I'm on for the B&G update later. Do you want me to wait and do it then?
yes,
Okay.
perfect. Okay, thanks. And then we have two more items, the Department of Health update. So this week, thanks to Jim Dexter, he pulled the superintendents together, and we had the Warren, Washington, Saratoga Department of Health leaders with us. And that meeting was extremely valuable in some of the discussions that both Fran and Jim have brought forward, and you, around end of the year ceremonies, graduations, obviously youth theater, youth commission. So, in summary, these folks are basically saying to us that right now, as it stands, they're not condoning any type of gatherings with our students. And, that's going to present a lot of challenges for us. When it comes to moving up ceremonies, when it comes to our award ceremonies, when it comes to our graduation. And, I just appreciated so much Jim and Fran. We're doing the best we can to be proactive, and we're planning. We're planning for the worst and hoping for the best, but I think it's a really important discussion to have with the board, because this is becoming a community discussion point, and it's not just the senior parents and the sixth grade parents. We had one of the superintendents up north said some parents are planning their own graduation. And so Fran don't we, Fran? We get ideas every day about where we should do it, and hang gliding and parasailing and stuff. And we appreciate it. But I mean, ultimately, we have a lot of people asking and sharing, and that's wonderful. But this is going to be the graduation is a very emotional ceremony. It's a tradition, and we are so dedicated to doing it right. But I think it's also important just that when we're planning, we can hear what you're thinking, so that there's no surprises.
So I think that I'll start. I think that, yes, I think you're right, is a very important ceremony, a very important thing for our seniors. I think this needs obviously to be looked at under the lens of safety being the first priority. You guys are going to make the right decisions. What our students in our community, but safety needs to be the first consideration in this.
And we are holding off, as much as Fran said. We appreciate everyone's patience on this. We're holding off because we don't want to get out there and then have to take something back. But it's, we're kind of walking a tightrope on it. And we also have the top 10 who have been instrumental in giving Fran the feedback, and, it's a tradition to keep it a little bit of a secret. So, there will be things that will not be disclosed. But it's also with the sixth grade moving up ceremony, and our award ceremony. When we were on with the seniors, those were some of the questions, like, how are we going to do our award ceremony? And, we can only hold off so long, but I mean, you're also parents as well as board members. So I think it's just good for us to hear what you're thinking.
Lynn, also, I think, in my head, I guess, as I've envisioned this as time has rolled on, it feels to me like we have facilities that are large enough, depending on where the state of the crisis is at the point where the decision needs to make. We have facilities that are large enough that would allow for some form of live ceremony, for our students, and very, very, very limited people beyond that. I know traditionally we have staff members, anybody who wants to come, really, as far as people associated to the graduate, and even if you're not, you can still go. I think potentially having something just for students that potentially is live streamed elsewhere, in a facility. I don't think, if the conditions presented themselves, that I wouldn't be opposed to something like that. But I think we'd need certainly buy-in from our seniors as well.
So I told Fran this, we laughed a little about it, that, some folks were actually already in contact with pods, that they were going to put families in pods so that they could watch. I mean, it's all over the place. But again, I thought that sounded like a wonderful idea. The Department of Health really was less than positive about that, so it's, and then we've talked about, could we push this off, July, August, there's a lot to consider with this. I mean, even with Mr. Conway, I mean, his moving up ceremony, I don't, he's going to figure that out as well. I mean, and there's a huge crowd for that as well, Mr. Conway. So
Lynn,
Some of the feedback the students have been giving is that the senior class has expressed, if we're able to do so, and we kind of liken it again to that dial of where the dial is at on June 26th or 27th, or perhaps in July, they have expressed a desire for an in-person ceremony, not a virtual ceremony. At least that's the will of the senior class, of those who have been speaking out and looking at all of those alternatives, Tim, that you're talking about. Lynn and I and Mike Varney and Lindy Seacard, we've walked to various places around the village, within the village, outside the village, at the elementary school, at the high school, just how we could very safely and appropriately conduct the ceremonies outside. You know, just as a footnote, it's reassuring to hear that statewide Memorial Day ceremonies, although sizes of 10 and less, are able to occur this weekend. So that was surprising to hear that the governor is allowing local municipalities to do ceremonies of 10 or less for Memorial Day. So perhaps there might be a different dial late June or early July that would facilitate us to be able to do something safely outside. I think we've abandoned the ability to do something inside. I don't know how logistically we'd be able to pull that off unless the dial is completely turned in the open direction. But it really depends on the phase that we're in.
So don't you think like the auditorium would be set up perfectly for like a, you know, in one door, down one aisle, separated students only, separated, you know, by rows and by seats. You know, when they're called, they go out one way across the stage, back in, type of situation. You know, something logistical. But that is what it is. When you go outside, you're always at the mercy of Mother Nature.
I still like the drive-in movie theater idea.
I think what Lynn said in terms of hoping for the best, and that dial that Fran was talking about, where, you know, we have no idea where we're going to be at the end of June with the sanctioned number of people that can be at a gathering. It could go backwards from here, quite honestly. You know, we just don't know. And I think that it's important for us to have a worst case scenario plan and give that some thought, because we want, even if we're in a worst case scenario, we want that to be special and we want it to be unique, and that will take some thought and time for planning. And then, you know, give ourselves that room to, in a better case scenario, go to an in-person opportunity. And I think that it would be great to get thinking caps on and have an update on that, you know, at our next meeting. So we know that we are putting enough time and planning so that we have plan A, plan B.
I agree with Tricia entirely. It would be a shame to try to plan for something that might not occur and not have anything else in place ready to go. That would be a terrible disappointment to the students. So I agree with what Tricia's saying. We, you know, plan, A, B, C, D, however.
I can assure you that every potential is being thought of for plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D if the dial is turned backwards. We're a small enough school that we'd be able to really be thoughtful and creative in what we do. So long as the size doesn't go below 10, because if it goes below 10, then that would make it really difficult. But we could do 83 unique individualized ceremonies with each family, Lynn and I, and perhaps a representative from the board. But I can assure you that our best thinking caps are planning all of those things. So
I wasn't insinuating, Fran, that you weren't.
yeah,
I know how important, especially this graduation year, is to you, and I truly appreciate the thoughtfulness that you're giving this in such a difficult situation. It is so challenging, and everyone is doing just their best work.
Yeah, it's difficult to not to try not to personalize it, you know, and think about the opportunity to hand your little baby boy his diploma along with 83 of his best friends. So I trust you that Lynn and I are putting our best thinking caps to make it Lake George special. Whatever that looks like, we're going to do our best because this community expects nothing less than that. And we'll make it happen.
We've never disappointed. So
Yeah.
Thanks. And we just appreciate the dialogue. Again, we don't want you to be surprised. And, you know, if you have thoughts after this, let us know. Again, Youth Commission will be impacted by Department of Health. We had a great meeting, Jim, Fran, myself, and Nancy Stannard and Vinny Cressito. Was Mike there? Mike? I don't know if you were there, but it was a good, and Kathy O'Brien. And they have a lot to think about. You know, some realities are a lot of, and this is a good discussion to have if people are listening who need childcare and depend on this, that most of the folks around us have canceled. And I believe it was Fran who brought up a really good point that they're all going to come to Lake George for the Youth Commission if, you know, all these places are canceled. And so we really want to support the opening of our economy. However, we have to be careful that, you know, that we can do this with our custodial staff and that they can do it with their staff. So they kind of decided to go away and reach out to the Department of Health, and they should have some answers for us very soon. So I appreciated that. And then the last big announcement here, which is wonderful that we have finally gone back and forth, and we have a last day for students established that I shared with the faculty and staff earlier today, and that will be the 17th of June, last day for students. And the last day for our 10-month faculty and staff will be the 23rd of June. And so we have a lot to get done. Fran and Jim and I, Megan, have been talking, as well as Mike, about how to make the end of the year safe and productive so we can start scaffolding people in to clean out their classrooms, and then to also get some students supplies to them, and also get the computers worked out. So there's a lot of work to be done, but we absolutely have guidance from our BOCES safety specialist about how that's going to happen. And I have the utmost confidence that Fran and Jim and their SDM teams are going to make that happen the way it's supposed to. Masks, social distancing, cleaning, signing in, all of that. So the teachers received word about that today, and Fran and Jim will give more details around how they want that to look in each building. Questions?
Is there any alternative plan there's usually a retirement luncheon that involves everybody at the end of school?
We're going to have that over at the RV park, Lynn.
Yeah. You guys can't afford the RV park. Be real.
Ginger Cook is the second choice.
There you go. Now you're talking.
Honestly, I haven't really.
I just wondered.
Yeah, and the student ceremonies are the top priority right now. But we will make sure that even if it's not now, that we ask folks to come back to do that. So that is it for me. Whew.
All right. Lynn, thank you. That was a big list to get through, but I think that there was some excellent dialogue and good conversation around some very important topics. So I thank you for bringing those up and answering lots of questions.
I want to just make sure for folks that are listening, I did send the feedback from the shared decision-making teams, the principals, and LGEA to you as well. And so I didn't go through every bullet, but they have been shared with you by email.
Yep. Thank you. And next up, we have Melissa Seal with the Athletic Committee report.
Right. Wow, Lynn, that was a lot. Let me see. Where are we here? All right, the athletics committee meeting. We had a meeting in light of everything that's going on right now with COVID-19 and the changes that are being made because of that. We had a meeting on May 6th to discuss these changes and how we were going to honor our students moving forward. We had a discussion on the finalized hiring process, and I want to thank Kyle, Fran, and Lynn on their collaboration and their work towards this goal. I feel that we now have a process in place where we're going to get more continuity and structure in our coach hiring process. We also had discussion in regards to how to utilize thought exchange to get information from the community, from students about our athletic programs moving forward. And at the point of this meeting, Fran and Lynn, we're going to discuss this further to determine a timeline when thought exchange could be utilized. Fran and Lynn, has any determination been made, or can you let everyone know where we're at with that?
Yeah, great progress was made. Fran, I'll let you update that. Really good stuff.
Yeah, so we met, Kyle, Lynn, and I, and we talked further about tweaking that original survey, Melissa, just to kind of consider, you know, the world we've been in the past 43 days or whatever, you know. And additionally, to take into consideration the upcoming budget vote and board election. And we determined that we would do it after that. And Lynn and Kyle are going to do pre-recorded messaging so that folks will hear directly the purpose behind the survey so that they don't jump to any sort of conclusions on their own, that there's no backstory here. We are legitimately looking for feedback in declining enrollment. We're not making any decisions. Let me say that again. We're not making any decisions about cutting teams or cutting back in any areas, but we want people's thoughts. So Lynn and Kyle thought it'd be best if folks heard it and saw it through a video, and then they could participate in that thought exchange. And Kyle's worked with Megan directly to retool that survey.
And I need to just get, I need to get with Megan to do another video.
That's great. I love that idea.
But post election and budget vote, so mid-June.
Okay. And Lynn, what our contract again goes to the end of June with thought exchange?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's like, you know, July 1. So we'll get it out.
Okay.
Additionally, there was another consideration that Lynn afforded and allowed for is because of the topic of athletics. Megan and Kyle and Lynn and myself will moderate. What's the right word, Lynn?
Yeah, I think you can moderate it.
Moderate the conversation. We're going to have it open for a week and be able to monitor things.
Basically, that we're all the leaders. So if things come up that are not helpful, they can go in and we're not trying to censor it, but you know, it's okay to hear negative feedback, but when it's personalized, then we would parking lot that because that's not helpful.
There you go. Good job, guys. I love that. All right. And then the final thing that we discussed was making sure that we could honor our students, our athletes, seniors and other athletes in general towards the end of the year. A couple of things that you may have already seen, the senior athlete posters that were displayed along the girls' soccer field fence at the elementary school. We got those out for the spring senior athletes, senior night recognition. Each spring senior athlete will be receiving a framed varsity letter for a celebratory letter signing for the students that are continuing their athletic careers in college. You know, signing a celebratory letter, but that's in flux because we're waiting guidance from the governor and CDC on that. And then the senior sport awards, you know, we're going to give them a commemorative plaque, and that was paid for by the boosters. And then a special athletic department awards, photo, slideshow, video montage, and celebration of those senior athletes and their families. But once again, that is dependent on the CDC and the governor. So those things, last two things are kind of up in the air, but we do have something in place in case we can't move forward with that. So we were able to at least nail that down, and that was it. Any questions, comments?
Melissa, do you know if any of the senior athlete pictures that are posted on the fence at the elementary school got blown away the day after they were put up? I think there was that big wind that came through.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know that some of them were like flapping in the breeze, and Kim and I don't know who else went over, Kim Zellman went over and refixed those, but I thought that a couple or one maybe had just blown off, and I didn't know if there's that get replaced or.
Yeah, it was our intention that each of the seniors take that as a souvenir of their of their athletic career at Lake George. So if a senior did not get their poster, please let us know so we can get it replaced.
So that was our surprise. So don't repeat that.
Oh, darn it! I'm sorry.
And it wasn't.
I didn't know that was the surprise.
It wasn't the wind. It was actually a few midnight escapades, but they were put back and reattached, and they are all there. I can tell you that Kim and Kyle have kept track of them every day.
Well, I got to tell you,
strike that.
It's impressive looking. It's absolutely impressive looking when you drive by there. It really is.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you, Melissa, and
Yeah.
good work there, everybody. Moving on to Audit and Finance Committee report, Tim Collins.
Great, thank you. So we met last week on the 15th, primarily reviewed the budget presentation with Mike. I'm not going to reiterate. I'm looking at our notes, and it's all of the basically the same things that Mike highlighted in his presentation. So I'm not going to go over that again. We also reviewed the reserve plan update. Mike did a really nice job of going over the reserve plan. A handful of years ago, we instituted kind of a reserve plan that outlined the uses and the need for each reserve and what the adequacy of the funds in the reserve were deemed to be. And Mike did a really nice job of outlining in his presentation how the funds had been used in the reserve, what had been used, what the current levels were, and what his anticipated need for replenishment of those reserves were. And unfortunately, based on current circumstances and the use of some reserves, there is going to be a need to replenish reserves going forward. We also reviewed tax cap planning. We took a look at the debt service schedule tax levy projection through 2026-27. So it was just kind of a forward-looking look at our finances. We spent actually a fair amount of time talking about the timing and the process of the upcoming budget vote, making sure that all the processes were in place that as the budget got approved by the board, that the information was getting out timely to the voters, and that processes were in place to make sure that everything was in order there. And I will say thank you to Sarah Barton. She put up with many questions from us regarding that, and has it very well planned out for us. And was more than willing to chime in with her concern in certain areas, and making sure that everybody was focused on getting the job done. And as Lynn mentioned earlier, we also discussed briefly the non-resident tuition and the recommendation not to move forward with that at this time. That's been rattling around in this committee for quite some time. Did anyone have any questions about things from the Audit and Finance Committee?
How many of the, I've forgotten, Tim, how many of the reserve funds are capped?
Just a couple.
Okay,
just a couple, I believe, that are capped. I know the emergency reserve, I believe, is capped, and then there's another one that's capped with a specific dollar, I believe. Is that accurate, Mike?
Yeah, the emergency repair and the capital reserve.
Capital reserve, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Tim, I just want to thank you and reiterate thanks to Sarah and the whole Audit and Finance Committee and Mike for fielding lots of questions during this budget season. I know that there's been a lot of dialogue around the shifts in our processes, but also the scrutiny to the budget itself. Thank you for that hard work.
Oh, yes, you're welcome.
Okay, moving on to Mike Varney, you're up with Buildings and Grounds.
Okay, so last week we talked about a couple things when we met as a committee. We talked about the need for a new custodian or a new cleaner, probably a type of setup where we would have somebody going back and forth between buildings and filling needs as they arise. And I gave an update on the construction schedule, which I'll just go back through briefly here. As to what's going on. Right now, the tennis courts, the boilers, the front sidewalks, and the front entry are very much in operation. The tennis courts, I like to walk up there every day. It's kind of neat to see, but right now they're starting the foundation, the framing for the concrete, the huge retaining wall. It's going to beyond the southern or the lower portion of the courts. The old boilers are out and they're working on piping and mechanical work, and soon we'll start to install the new boilers. Sidewalks are all dug up. They're grading the ground out front, getting ready to replace them. And the front entry, they've just done some basic asbestos work. Not really much has been done yet there. The technology rooms have all been emptied out and are slated to start in early, well, they could start as early as next week. Same with the elementary school cluster doors and the bridge extension. The track surface is scheduled to start in early June. And the stage is still not slated to happen until out into September. Once we get more specifics as to what we may or may not need that for over the summer, that could potentially get moved up earlier. But there's a lot of activity going on around here for the capital project. That's it. Anybody have any questions?
I don't have a question, Mike, but I have a comment. Having been involved in almost every building project since 1986, that the tennis courts have been put in at the beginning and yanked out of almost every project. And it's near and dear to my heart. Since I got on the board, I've wanted to see those lovely, awful looking tennis courts replaced. And boy, this is kudos to you.
I think it's going to look really sharp up there.
It's look great.
Along.
Makes me very happy.
Thank you, Mike. And moving on to the Policy Committee report, Mary Ann McKenzie.
Okay, thank you. So in the Policy Committee in the past month has received policy updates from Erie One BOCES for 4 policies, which are up for first read this evening. 2 of them were actually on track for second read tonight, but they received these updates in the meantime, so you'll see them under first read. They are school safety plans and immunization of students. So if they look familiar, they are. So we have those 4 that we reviewed electronically. And in addition to that, we have a new policy in first read that is called the Federal Grant Fund Policy COVID-19. And this policy is new, and it came about per a WSHWE CSO request and was developed by our legal counsel using US DOE guidance. And the purpose of this policy is to codify the use of federal grant monies during times of crisis, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. because we're currently living through a time such as that, the COVID-19 pandemic, we're recommending that this policy, that we deviate from our normal two-read procedure, and that we, the recommendation is to have this just go to first read and potentially be adopted, so that it can go into effect as soon as possible. In addition to that, our policy committee met virtually last Monday, and we discussed our kind of main conversation was around next steps for the policy committee. How do we want to organize ourselves and move forward now that the backlog of policies is completed? And the general idea that we talked about was developing some form of a regular review cycle that complements our Erie 1 BOCES update services. There were a couple of areas of ambiguity, so this is really, we're not quite in focus on this. There was a little bit of question around what the review cycle is for Erie 1, looking at each policy, and when is the last time that the Lake George Policy Committee actually has laid eyes on certain policies. So a little bit more research is needed. I did speak with our Erie 1 representative, Janelle Halgren, last Friday and got a little bit more information. So to be determined on that. But the basic idea really is to establish, what are the best practices to become and maintain a high functioning committee now that we're kind of starting fresh again. We had a couple of policy follow-ups. The policy 7521, which is students with life-threatening health conditions. To refresh your memory, that's the policy where we were bringing on the use of Narcan for life-threatening conditions, and that policy was set to go into effect July 1st. Because we needed time, the district needed time to do training and procure the medication. The pandemic presented an added barrier to that. And so you'll see this on the consent or on the agenda tonight as a resolution to push that date out to September 1st to allow time to get those pieces accomplished, the training pieces. And we also talked again in policy committee about the non-resident students policy, separate from the conversation about tuition adjustment. We just put fresh eyes on the policy and reviewed it for proper language. And we did ask our legal counsel to take another look at it and vet it for accountability, and we received the communication that the policy is solid and accountable to the law as is, and no need to revise at this time. And then the last thing we talked about was we were making a plan to adjust our policy committee meeting time to 15 minutes earlier when we do get back together in the building, so that we allow a little bit of wiggle room for people who are planning to attend the PTSO meetings, which these two meetings have been back to back historically. So we're going to create a little wiggle room. I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions, folks? All right, so we're a little over 2 hours into our meeting. I'm going to invite folks, if you need to stand up and stretch for a moment, go ahead and do that. I'm going to put this on my screen just to remind folks that in a little while we will be reading out any public comments. So if you want to, start typing those in and sending those in, they will be in my inbox and I'll be able to read them. So let's do a 1-minute stretch.
Tricia, I just wanted to mention that Melissa Seal is having trouble with her connection, but she is trying to reconnect now.
I have her on speaker so she can hear anyway.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You hear that, Melissa?
As long as I can hear what's going on.
Okay, that's better. We can hear you too. Okay.
Very good. Which will be important when we come to votes here. That we'll be able to hear a verbal response from Melissa.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, so we've got, okay, Marianne is back, and we're just waiting for Tim to come back to the screen because we're coming up on voting.
I really needed that.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. And Tom Sedgwick, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Okay, very good.
Paying attention.
All right.
No,
Thank you so much.
Still no picture, Tom. We can't see your handsome face.
Yeah, you're lucky.
All right. So Lynn, I think we can proceed with recommendations for the consent agenda.
Okay. As recommended by the superintendent, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Lake George Central School District hereby approves the school business consent agenda items A through N.
Move approval.
Second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any discussion? Motion carried. All right. Next up, we have some retirements.
As recommended by the superintendent, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Lake George Central School District hereby approves the faculty staff consent agenda items A through C. And it is with sorrow but excitement for the folks in the next journey of their life that if you accept this, that both Lisa Lindsay, Susan Mason, and Susan Moosberger be thanked for their years of service to our students.
I move with extreme gratitude to the motion.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried with, how about we all go ahead and unmute ourselves and give a round of applause for the service and dedication of these individuals to our system, Lisa, Susan, and Susan. Excellent. Thanks so much. Next up, we have an appointment.
As recommended by the superintendent, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Lake George Central School District approves the faculty staff consent appointments, item A.
Move approval.
I was going to second it, but I also had a question, so I wasn't sure when the right time to ask.
So you second it, and then we'll go ahead and do a conversation, comment.
Okay, second. So Lynn, I was just wondering if you would mind just taking a second to explain sort of how the evolution of this appointment and what the structures around that data protection officer looks like.
Sure. Happy to. Thank you for the question. This is very new, as you know, and from our training at NYSBA, we have evolved through the data privacy officer and mandates, and Megan, you feel free to chime in. But when we really first started learning more about this, it was very gray, very cloudy. And as we moved through the process with BOCES and got a lot of feedback from the district superintendents and the instructional technology leaders, and as well as NARIC, what we have decided to do in our district with feedback from both Megan and Matt is to, BOCES is going to create a service and has created 2 positions that are data privacy officers, and they manage the mandates, the regulation, the direct line from the state education department. The mandate also states that that we have to have a data privacy officer named in the district. And we all agreed that that would be the superintendent of schools. And that means that I am not going to do all of the data privacy responsibilities, but it is ultimately my responsibility to make sure that we have a system in place, we have go-to people, and we have established structures. And so in doing that, we recognize that one person is that BOCES is hiring through a COSER, so we'll get 8 on that, will not be able to get into the many districts that she's serving. So I talked with Matt and Megan and Mike and said, look, I really think that we've got the manpower, but that's not the only job. So I don't know if I want to have an entire person be brought on to do data privacy officer when we have 2 skilled individuals, which are Matt and Megan, who will be the liaison and the coordinators from the BOCES folks. And so kudos to Meg, who has been proactive in researching and being trained, as well as Megan, her organization and leadership around what needed to be done well before it got asked of us to really get to the teachers, talk about, hey, this is going to really change the tools that we use, the permissions, the licenses. She's been working really great with BOCES in collaboration and really been a leader in that area. And BOCES did just hire their data privacy officer that we will have a fraction of that person to help work with our liaisons. So it is a multi-tiered system that has evolved. So I am the data privacy officer in kind of name only, but I'm up to date on the mandate, the regulations, as is Megan, that I rely heavily on, but also that BOCES person to make sure that we have that connection between state ed and ourselves. Did I miss anything, Meg?
No, that sounds good.
And so we offered to give Matt and Megan's position a stipend because that is above and beyond what they were hired to do. And it's a whole new realm. And they graciously accepted and have done a great job with that position.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Does that make sense?
All right, excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Excellent. And are we getting Melissa on this too?
Yes, she said aye.
Yep. Okay, great.
I'm listening.
Excellent. That's great. Okay, so we have come up to our public comments portion, and I don't have any in my inbox. How about you, Sarah?
I don't have anything.
Okay, very good. Then we're moving along to excuse me just a second. Any other board comments?
Just again to say that our leadership at the school have done a tremendous job keeping our kids informed, keeping the community informed, and thank you for all that you are doing.
Echo that. And good meeting, lots of good conversation tonight. Thank you, everybody, for your attention, your involvement. Thank you, everyone who is attending this meeting as a community member. We appreciate you paying attention and being here. I've seen the numbers go down a little bit. It's a longer meeting, but it's great to have you all here. And I would like to go ahead and propose an executive session for the purpose of talking about 2 employees' employment history.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Thanks. And all in.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? No. Motion carried. We're going into executive session. And folks, I'm going to go ahead and send you a link for a Google Meet. So that will be coming at you. You can take a moment for a bathroom break.
Tricia, I did send that link to the a calendar invite to all the board members already. So they just need to check their email from me.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we don't expect to return to regular session from our executive, correct?
So we'll just X out of this and then go into a new meeting.
That's correct. And Sarah, I will, as I did with the last executive session, make sure you get the time for when we exited executive session and adjourn the meeting.
Great.
And I don't see in my oh, I see it. Yep, I have it right here. Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. See everybody. Have a good night. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.